So there's a movement and some kind of language that you may have heard kind of just recently where we hear of folks who are supposedly and so-called deconstructing their faith. And of course, you know, that's a buzzword that we just have to instantly react against and get mad about without really understanding it at all. I mean, this week, saw another kind of news story, longtime Christian and Christian artist who said, "I'm no longer a Christian. I just have to be honest, I've deconstructed my faith." And so we kind of react against that really radically sometimes. But here's the reality, and we're going to talk a little bit about today, is we should be regularly deconstructing anything that's not true. And if we've bought into it and believed it and it's not true, it's just a facade. And, you know, you and I, it's not really wise to put our weight on and be standing on something that is not true. And so part of why we're regularly gathering and part of pursuing Jesus is to say, Jesus, is there any part of my belief system or my value system that's not yours and it's not true that needs to be deconstructed so that I can be standing on the truth? Today, we're going to do a little bit of deconstruction. And what I'd love for us to begin to consider is that old belief that goes something like this: if I do right, then God will always bless me. Maybe you've heard it another way. Be responsible, do the right thing, God will always bless you. Today I want us to kind of rethink that and kind of begin to deconstruct that. Part of the problem with that, I would say the main part of the problem, is how we define blessing. And that usually we typically define blessing as financial blessing, material blessing, having more stuff, or just like ease of life kind of blessing. Like, if you have an easy life, you must be blessed. And that's how, you know, therefore, if you don't have an easy life, you must not be blessed. A lot of the problem with that is we need to deconstruct how we define the word blessing and how we understanding blessing. But I think we need to push it even further, and we're going to do that. So take your Bibles if you have them. If you want to follow along, today we're in Genesis chapter 39. We're just kind of continuing to walk through the story. And today we're looking again at Joseph. Joseph is Jacob, or Israel's oldest son of his favorite wife. In all of his brothers, he came as number 11. And so Joseph, we talked a little bit last week of the story that Joseph was hated by his brothers. Part of that was his own immaturity and saying and doing some things he shouldn't have said and done that kind of, you know, brought some of that on himself. But still, for him to be sold into slavery by his brothers, extremely unfair. Even if he was immature, even if he was unwise, nobody deserves that. And we ended up last week, and so Joseph is sold into slavery in Egypt. And so that's where we're going to pick up the story here today, starting in Genesis chapter 39, verse 1. Now, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites and who had taken him there. Now, the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. And when his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes, and he became his attendant, became his personal assistant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted everything to his care, everything he owned. And so from the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything that Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. And with Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. So it's unfair, highly unfair, that Joseph has been sold into slavery. God works it out that the guy who buys him just happens to be the captain of the Egyptian guard, a man of position and power in the Egyptian empire, and God's going to kind of work that to we'll just have to come back next week to see how that turns out. It actually kind of works pretty well, but still a slave, right? And so Joseph finds himself as a slave, and he works hard, and he's responsible, right? And hey, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Joseph's cranking out the lemonade like crazy, right? He's like, be mature, be responsible, work hard, #blessed. And everything that he does, he's blessed. And because he's blessed and God's with him, then Potiphar's blessed. And Potiphar, his house runs smoothly. Everything's going well. He puts him in charge of everything in the house. And Potiphar's like, life is really great right now. I can go to work. I can do my job. I come home, and home is taken care of because I got this awesome slave that I happen to buy, and he's taking care of everything. And life is good for Joseph, right? Just work hard, be responsible, do what's right. God will always bless you. I have to tell you, though, this is a naive way of viewing life. It's a dangerous way of viewing faith. Because all it takes is one bad thing to happen that doesn't fit in the blessed category, and all of a sudden, this foundation is gone, and the whole thing can wash away. Part of the problem is how we define blessed. This thought that if I do right, then God will bless me and life will be good. In other words, life will be easy. But will it? Continue to read the story. Continue on here. Last half chapter of verse 6. Now Joseph was well built and handsome. Interesting for the Bible to say that. Look what happens though. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." Yes, this is in the Bible, because the Bible just tells it like it is. But Joseph refused. "With me in charge," he told her, "my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in his house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except for you, because you are his wife. So how then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" And although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even to be with her. When we read this, we're like, oh, I know what this is. This is the test, right? Because there's always tests, and God's always testing us. And so this is the test. What will Joseph do? And there's a good little moral in the story. Joseph recognizes the value and the importance of character and being a man of character. And he eventually, like last week we discovered, that Joseph is he's making bad decisions, kind of pretty immature, and we're not even really sure if he even really kind of believes in God. But at some point in the story, and our small group had a really good discussion of this last Sunday night, like at some point in the story, Joseph has an encounter with God. We don't really know when it happened, but he has an encounter with God that changes his heart. It changes how he treats people. Something changes in Joseph. And, we could go around the room and share our stories of our encounter with Jesus that has been life-changing. Therefore, it changes how we speak to people, the decisions we make, the values that we buy into. Joseph has had a change here. And he's willing to say, look, I'm now finding my identity in God. Therefore, I can't do this. I'm going to be a man of character. And he realizes, I'm not going to kind of cheat and push the envelope, even if I can get away with it. Joseph has the wisdom to stay away. I love this, how he recognizes this is a bad situation. She's harassing me, putting me in a really difficult situation. And so he not only refuses her advances, but he stays away from her. He's like, don't even get close to the fire, okay? Don't even just stay away as possible. What's interesting here, just a little aside, right? There's this, in our culture, in our hyper-sexualized culture, there's this weird thing that folks might read that and say, Joseph, this is your opportunity, man. Like the inappropriate locker room talk, right? She wants you, man. You can have some of that. No, Joseph is really wise in that he actually saves himself from trauma later on. This is a sexual harassment situation because she has power and he has none. And he's a young man, she's an older woman. Let's not just call this ooh, it's a cougar situation. Ooh, our culture, we're so sick and twisted, right? Actually, stories of young men who've been in situations like this, there's a 4 times greater chance that they will experience trauma, self-harming behaviors of experiencing something like this. Luckily, the situation was able and worked out so that Joseph was able to stay away, but also wise enough to stay away, and actually saved himself from future trauma. Unfortunately, not everybody who finds himself in a situation is able to avoid it and get out of there, but Joseph is able to get out of it. So let's not read some like sick and twisted American hypersexualized thing that says, and actually realize Joseph actually made the wise decision here and saved himself from a lot of trauma later on. Look what happens though. Verse 11. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. Uh-oh. She caught him by his cloak, and she said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand, and he ran out of the house. Good move. Wise choice, Joseph. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called to her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and he ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. And then she told him the story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me, but as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and he ran out of the house." Uh-oh, because Joseph is a slave with no power, no influence. She is a free, wealthy, powerful woman. Whatever she says will be believed. And although Joseph has done the right thing, the power differential in this story is too great for him to come out on top. Look at what happens, verse 19. So when his master heard the story that his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Joseph didn't even get a chance to defend himself or even be listened to. Verse 20. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. How's your theology of #blessing going now? Joseph has done the right thing. And we always say, do the right thing and you'll be blessed. And here he is sitting in prison. And you'd be like, well, it's the king's prison. The king's dirt is still dirt. A king's beating is still a beating. He's in prison for doing the right thing, making the right choice when he was caught in a really bad situation. And he has been falsely accused. His character has been falsely accused, and people think things of him that are absolutely not true. Now, there is some good news here. Maybe just enough to keep us reading. We read the rest of the story there at the end of verse 20. Now, while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him, the most important piece. And he, the Lord, showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those who he had held in the prison. And he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. But he's still in prison. He's still a slave. He doesn't have any freedom. He doesn't get to go where he wants and do what he wants to do. Life is hard, man. The story continues. And I'm not going to read the next chapter. You should read it. You should really read it all, get the whole story on yourself. It's really for yourself. It's really, really fascinating. Here's what happens in chapter 40. So he's in prison. And at some point, after some time, the story tells us, it wasn't just like a 2-week deal, and then he's, sprung loose, and life is good, we're blessed again, a little bit of no, he's there for a while. And while he's there, the king's cupbearer and the king's baker are also thrown in prison. The king of Egypt, they just kind of get crossways with him for some reason. He throws them into prison, and they both have dreams. And they wake up really troubled by these dreams. And of course, we've kind of already discovered that there was this belief that you have a dream, that means something, that God's trying to tell you something. And look at what Joseph, remember, like Joseph has he's kind of recognized that God is with him in a special way, and he understands what dreams are all about. Look what he says. So they tell him, "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there's no one to interpret them." Well, then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." And so Joseph is like, look, dreams and their interpretations belong to God. God seems to be with me. I'm not really sure why or what I've kind of done to deserve that, but God seems to be with me. Tell me your dreams. I'll pray. I'll talk to God. And if God chooses to reveal it to me, maybe I can help you out with your dreams. And so they both tell him their dreams. They both have really interesting dreams. And God gives to Joseph the interpretation of those dreams. And so he goes back and he says to the cupbearer, he said, there's some significance of the number 3 in your dream, and that just means that, well, God has told me that in 3 days you will be let out of prison and you will be restored to your position as the king's cupbearer. Good news. The cupbearer's like, yeah, 3 more days. The baker's like, ooh, what about me? There was something about 3 in there also, and Joseph's like, oh, bad news, bro. In 3 days you will also be taken out of prison and put to death. Enjoy your last 3 days. And it happens exactly as Joseph said. But listen, Joseph sees an opportunity here, and he knows how bad it is right now. And this is a reminder that we shouldn't just kind of blow over these stories as like, oh, it's Joseph. God's with him. Everything's wonderful and great. No, not everything is wonderful and great. He's in prison, the last place that he wants to be, and he doesn't want to be there. And so look at this conversation that he has with the cupbearer, who he knows will survive and will be restored to his position and at least be close to people of influence and power who might be able to get him out of there because he's in jail, falsely accused. Verse 14. So he says to the cupbearer, when all goes well with you and you're let out of prison and restored to your position, when all goes well with you, remember me, and would you show me kindness for giving you this word of encouragement? Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. He's like, I hate it here. Get me out. Whatever you can do. When you have the chance someday and you take the drink for Pharaoh and you determine that, there's no poison in the drink and you give it to him, someday when he ever asks your opinion, would you do me one bit of kindness and say, hey, I was in prison with this guy. He was a really cool guy. He was close to God. His name's Joseph. Please remember me. I'm stuck in this dungeon. And guess what? Verse 23, the last verse in this chapter. It happens just like he says. Chief cupbearer is restored to his position next to Pharaoh. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. Last line of the chapter, he forgot him. Hashtag blessed. Blessed and highly favored. Do the right thing. God will always bless you. And he's stuck there. Forgotten. Do not underestimate. Just put yourself in his shoes, right? How stressful, discouraging. I don't know about you. I would be fuming, angry, mad at Potiphar for not even giving me a chance. And of course at his wife for the harassment and the false accusation. Now at these guys, Pharaoh, God, everybody. Like, what have I done to deserve this? Do right and you'll be blessed. The reality is, so he sits here, it tells us, for another 2 years. Most of us, maybe even myself, I'll be honest, most of us would quit before the 2 years are up. Most of us would walk away from God, claiming to deconstruct our faith, not believing any of it. The reality is, I know this is not what you showed up to hear today, but you do need to hear the truth, okay? The truth I want you to hear today is this. The truth is, sometimes when you do the right thing, sometimes you will not be rewarded and you will not be blessed. especially if you define blessing as finance, or money, more status, more ease. I mean, I don't know. You'd say, well, you could have the blessing of a clean conscience, and that is a huge blessing. I don't want to downplay that. Like, a clean conscience is great, but being in prison still stinks. So we read Joseph's stories, and we kind of know where the story's going, okay? Oh man, I hate spoiler alert here, okay? This is a rags to riches story. We like rags to riches story. Like, Joseph is the ultimate rags to riches story. Goes from like powerless and penniless slave to a wealthy, powerful savior of the Egyptian empire. Next week, we're going to read like the next part of the story in which Joseph actually gets out of this prison, and that he is put in a position of honor, and he's like the savior of the day and saves a whole lot of people from starvation. But right now, he's still in a prison. And that's where I want us to just kind of sit here today for a little bit. Because here's the reality. We like rags to riches stories, and we all want a riches story. We really don't like the rags part. Well, we like it in other people's, makes for a good story. We think we want a rags to riches story, that we want to live a rags to riches story. We just really don't want to live the rags part. But here's the reality. Here's the truth. We've all experienced, and maybe even right now you're going through one of the most difficult, stressful, painful, trying times of your life. And here is what we can hear and learn from this story and just the stories of people who've gone before us, and that is this, that sometimes, if we'll let them, hard times can shape us, and stress can actually strengthen us. And that's what I want you to consider today. We don't like stress, but stress can strengthen us. We don't like hard times, but hard times can shape us. In fact, I've heard story after story after story of someone who shares their pain that they went through. Whether it was pain caused by their own bad decisions or somebody else's bad decisions. And years later, looking back to say, I'm almost glad I went through it, because I came out stronger, better, more of the person that I wanted to become, but I never knew how to get there. And that really painful situation did that in me. All right, so a couple years ago, many of you guys, you know Andy Honnell, right? So a couple years ago, watching Andy sharing some of the stuff, he has a forge in his garage, and he is like making knives and all those cool stuff. And he brought one in one day and had this like sweet knife that Andy had made in his forge. It was sweet. It was awesome. And I was like, oh, that'd be really fun to try. And Andy's like, hey, come on over to my house sometime and bring Easton, and we'll make some stuff in the garage, and we'll put it in the forge and pound it on the anvil and make do some blacksmithing stuff, right? I'm like, this is going to be awesome. And I mean, I've watched half an episode of Forged in Fire. I'm pretty much an expert, right? And I understand the physics of it, right? You take a piece of metal and you put it in the fire, and you get it really, really hot. And it's so red hot that you can't really touch it. And I know the physics of it, how it works. Okay, you put it in the forge, you get it really, really hot, and then you pound it. And then what happens is the heat, especially when it's red hot, it actually softens the metal. And when the metal's soft, then it can be shaped. And so you take it and you put it on the forge, and you hit it a few times, and well, here's what I discovered. The first thing I discovered was, even though the metal is red hot, it's still just slightly softer than it was before. And so I'm like, got the hammer, and I've got it on the anvil, and I really wanted to bring the forge today. I was like thinking all week, how can we do this and have the forge here and have a real live demonstration? But then I was like, new insurance, we probably shouldn't burn the place down, Anyways. So just go with me, okay? If you're watching online, just like pretend that it's red hot, okay? So here's what I discovered. Red hot, you put it on the anvil, and you had to like hit it super hard just to get it to move a lot. And all of a sudden, like, my respect for Andy went through the roof. I'm like, bro, you're ripped to be able to do this. You're like tough as nails, and every blacksmith around you to do this like over and over and over and pound it. And so we worked that day, and we pounded and we worked, and it was awesome. Eventually, we'll see, we did like some smaller stuff, and then he's like, had this pile of like scrap steel, and he's like, hey, grab that bolt, and it looked kind of like this bolt, and so I took the bolt, heated it up, and check it out, this is what I made. Aren't I awesome? It's a hook. See, you can like still see where it used to be a bolt, and like pounded it down flat on that side, and then he showed how to like heat it up, and we put it in the little like square part in here, and we bent it over and got it, and the part that used to be the hex head of the bolt, like pounded it mostly round. I'm like, I'm awesome. He went from like a giant lag screw that I would never have any use for to a hook that is like totally useful. Yes, this whole thing is going somewhere. Here's the lesson. Metal, and I know this isn't scrap, but well, I'm not going to make anything with this lag bolt. Metal is shaped and formed into something useful only with high heat and lots of hammering. In fact, raw iron is turned into steel, which is strong. But it only becomes strong steel with high heat and lots of hammering. And I know you want to be great, and I want to be great. And I want to do great things for God. Pretty sure you want to do great things for God as well. I want to win. You want to win. What does it take to win? If you get a whole bunch of kids and you want to turn them into a winning football team, you got to push them. You got to make them run when they don't feel like running. You got to do up downs until they can't do any more up downs. You got to practice and drill and work hard, and it's painful. But without any pain, we don't win. And I want you to be shaped so that you can be useful. You could be a bolt. We need bolts. They hold stuff together. But if you want to be anything more than you are today, you're going to need to be shaped. But shaping only happens with high heat, lots of hammering. I want you to be strong to withstand whatever pressure and stress comes your way. The bad news, that's also good news, is that the only way for you to become stronger is to be heated, pounded, heated, hammered. Joseph, he's in the heat of a difficult moment. He was thrown into the forge of slavery, far away from home, in a foreign culture, in a foreign language. I'm sure he really wanted to run away from the heat of the situation. When you're in high heat, when I'm in high heat, I just want to run and get out of there. And then in the middle of a high heat situation, he's harassed. And he withstands the harassment, and he's falsely accused. You think that felt good? No way. He's already in a high heat situation. He gets thrown in prison, and he helps that guy out, and he says, please remember me. And you know what he said? He forgot about him. 2 years he sits there. Later on, as we're going to see, Joseph will look back to this moment, and he will say, when the heat was on and I'm getting pounded, God was strengthening me. But he's going to say that later on, looking back. In the moment, he's probably like, God, what are you doing? God, get me out of here. God, make it stop. God, where are you? Next week, he's going to get out of prison, though. in the story we're going to look at. He's going to get out of prison, and he will be given a big promotion to lead a major initiative for the Egyptian empire that ends up saving the nation. Now, we read the story, we're like, oh, how great that is. We all love to be promoted to positions of honor and power. But you know what comes with positions of honor and power and leading a major initiative that saves a nation? You make a lot of people mad. It's a high-stress situation. You know what? I'd like you to think today that the only way Joseph was able to lead and influence under the pressure and stresses of a multi-decade initiative that made a lot of people mad later on, he was able to withstand it because he had been strengthened through the pounding and the heating and the hammering. A lot of it occurred sitting in a dungeon. And you, living in the heat of a difficult work environment. As I've thought about today, here's what maybe just a way to think about this. The heating is like the environment in which you find yourself. And maybe at work right now, it is burning hot. And you're like, I just want to run and escape. I don't know if I can withstand the heat. How about the political and cultural climate we find ourselves in these days? Talk about who turned up the heat, man. You can't like anything with somebody criticizing you for liking it and not liking their thing. The heat is on. And God's like, don't wilt. Don't wither in the heat. I know it's hot, but stay in the heat. Don't run away. And then, in the middle of the heat, some of you are facing this, right? It's hot. And then you get accused of something. Your friend turns on you. Your wife leaves you. And you're like, I don't know if I can take this anymore. God, where are you? But here's what we're learning today. Stress is not the sign that God has abandoned you. Stress is just the stuff of life that strengthens you and forms you. Could it be that whatever you're going through right now, God is using it to make you stronger? Now, a couple of things so you don't take this too far and get way off track. The hammer is not God. God is not some kind of sadistic blacksmith that loves to beat the devil out of his kids. Okay? The hammer and the blacksmith is called life. Okay? And life will beat you down regularly. The people around you, full of pain, full of anger, full of whatever they're doing, they're going to come after you. That's just how it is, okay? God is not the blacksmith trying to beat you into submission. You know where God is in the story? God is down in that dungeon right next to Joseph holding his hand. The other piece you should know, as we learn more and more about trauma, is that sometimes the trauma you have faced, and anytime we are facing a beating, there is a level of trauma, but some trauma is so great and so significant that the beating has been so bad that you're actually in a place of being brittle. And just a little bit more is about to put you over the edge. And if that's you, if you're in that place of trauma, and trauma that is like holding you back, that is significantly debilitating you from doing the things you want to do, at that point, hammering doesn't really strengthen you. At that point is an indication that you could really probably benefit from some professional mental health counseling to find healing and re-strengthening. You see, just like we could use this analogy like a physical fitness analogy, that we push our bodies and that we work out and we actually cause a level of pain to make our bodies stronger. But if you have a broken bone, you're not going to go lift weights to heal the broken bone. You're going to go to a doctor, get the bone set, get medical treatment, and then when it's healed, then you go back to lifting weights to develop your strength. And so if there is some trauma in your life that is the equivalent of that broken bone, don't keep lifting weights. Please go find someone. And if you need some help, we actually have professional counselors that see clients here in our church building 4 days a week, and they're followers of Jesus who are fully licensed mental health counselors to help you find some healing. And yes, it's expensive, but you are worth it. And your health and your healing, they are worth it. But for most of us, it's the pain, the heat, and the hammering. And I really want it today again to be like uplifting and encouraging and feel good. But here's the truth, okay? How can you continue to get through what you're going through in the heat of the situation where you feel like you're constantly pounded on? How? A couple of hows, okay? First of all, maintain your connection with community. When you're getting pounded on, you cannot do it alone. You were not made to do it alone. That's why we regularly say you need a small group, you need a prayer group, you need a Bible study, you need a group of men around you, you need a group of women around you, you need a group of people around you who will be your cheerleaders to say, we're going to walk with you. I don't know why it's happening, but we're going to walk with you. You're going to make it. You're going to make it. Just keep on taking steps. And someday, I know it's hard to hear this now, but you're going to look back and we're going to talk differently about it later than we're talking about it now. But right now, we're going to walk with you, and God is with you. This is one of those but Jesus moments, right? And you hang out with your friends and say, I think Jesus has abandoned me. And you're like, nope, life is hard right now. But Jesus is walking with you. And you need some people around you to remind you of the truth when you're tempted to doubt the truth. What can I do now? You can also do everything you can do to maintain your connection with Jesus. It's why it's so important for us to regularly gather and worship. We come to church when we feel like it and when we don't feel like it, because we sing things like, I raise a hallelujah. I'm going to stand on the truth. I know who I am. In a minute, we're going to sing a song that says, I'm going to stand in your love. I'm going to stand in your love. I'm going to stand in your love. And even if I'm getting beat down, I'm going to stand up again. And Jesus, I'm going to stand in your love. We maintain our connection with Jesus with times of worship, with times of prayer. We get our Bible open and we're refreshed and reminded of the truth. We stay spiritually hydrated with God's truth so that we don't start believing lies and think that we need to deconstruct our faith when actually this is something that people have walked through. The truth of the matter is that life is hard, and Jesus is, and God's not the one beating on you. Jesus is right there holding you. Maybe one practical way, if you're really facing it and you're in the middle of it and this is your life this week, is to pray differently. Your tendency has been to pray, God, make it stop. God, make it stop. God, make it stop. God, make it stop. What if you were to pray differently? Instead of saying, God, make it stop, just to say, Jesus, hold me. Jesus, hold me. Jesus, walk with me. Jesus, come close. And he does. Jesus comes close and he says, I've been here before. I've taken that beating before. I've heard the pounding of the hammer onto a couple of nails by the side of my head. And in dying on the cross, I absorbed the sin of the world. And in dying on the cross, I absorbed the evil of the world. And even what that person is doing to you, what that group is doing to you, saying about you, the pounding that you are taking that is not fair and it's not right, I've been there before. And I'm going to walk with you and I'm going to hold you. And the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that Jesus died and was raised to life again. He died for the sins of the world and he was raised to life again, defeating the power of sin and death and hell. And so the Apostle Paul, he writes, to a group of Christians who can't understand all of the difficult things he is going through. And this is what he says to them. He says, hey, look, we are hard pressed on every side, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed. We're confused. We don't know what to do, but we are not in despair. We are persecuted, but we are not abandoned. Jesus is right here with us. We are struck down, but we are not destroyed. Why? Because we believe, yeah, come on, that we always carry in our body the death of Jesus Christ so that, come on, read the rest of this with me, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. We like the last part, the life of Jesus revealed in our body, and he says what goes right along with it is the gospel. We always carry around in our bodies the death of Christ. The beatings are real. The heat is real. The pain is real, man. But that's not the end of the story. And you're not alone. Worship team, come on back. Let's talk to God today. Jesus. Jesus, you got to bring some good news to some hurting hearts today. Jesus, in this situation of simply acknowledging the truth, it's revealed some pain. And Jesus, I pray for the people in this room, the people watching online, or maybe struggling because they're the only one in the room. Jesus, I pray, would you find every hurting person who really needs to feel your close presence today. And Jesus, would you saddle up close? Would you put your arms around us? And would you remind us of the truth that we are not abandoned, we are not alone. And Jesus, would you hold us today? Maybe as we're talking to God, maybe right now you'd say, well, yeah, I've been there before. Maybe right now you're not. Maybe right now you are in a good place that really feels like that traditional blessing, but you know someone. Come on, pray for them, intercede for them right now. That's part of our job as a family, as a church community, is that we pray for those who are hurting and having a hard time. Pray that they would feel the presence of Jesus saddling up close to them today. Jesus, come close. Jesus, we want to be strong. We so want to be useful and shaped and formed, but I don't want to go through the pain to get there. Jesus, you got to walk with us. And Jesus, I got to know that you're there walking right beside me. Jesus, come close today.